365 user group meeting today. This will be streaming on LinkedIn and also on YouTube. One quick thing with regards to housekeeping, we really love for this to be interactive. So you'll notice that there's a comments button up at the top there. So please feel free to post any comments or questions, and we'll kind of keep an eye on that chat so that we can answer anything that you might have. And with that, I would love to welcome Nick Stillings. Nick is Microsoft Cloud Solutions Architect. We all collaborate really well with the Minnesota 365 user group as well. So a lot of great things happening. Quick shout out there, if anybody is available on Friday, there's the spring workshop out at the Microsoft Center in Edina. It's a great workshop, and I would really encourage you to go. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Nick.
All right. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, great to do this with a fellow Minnesotan. We're recording this in mid-May 2025, so the ice just came off the lake, right? And what better time to celebrate than kind of look at, what better thing to do in spring? Kind of learn about new capabilities in Excel and Copilot. So for this session, I'm going to take you through what I have found are some kind of just really cool capabilities of working with Copilot, specifically Microsoft 365 Copilot in Microsoft Excel. And I'll show some examples. So I've got a couple of slides to queue us up. We'll hop out into demos. If you're watching the recording, please take a look in the comments below in LinkedIn or on the YouTube channel, because I'll reference a couple of links and we'll make sure we get those dropped in there so you can look at them. And then a tiny bit of housekeeping as well. Microsoft has our spring build conference coming up later this month. So if we make any big product announcements, it'll happen then. So if you're watching this recording and go, boy, he said something that's really out of date, that's why. So I've decided my next career, I'm going to be a Latin teacher, right? Some body of knowledge that never changes over 2,000 years, but it's kind of fun. It stays current. So let me pop up kind of what I'm thinking of focusing on. So I mentioned that there's kind of like, there's a lot of capabilities. These 5 kind of stood out to me. And so as I was talking with my tech a month ago, we were talking about what we might show. I was like, yeah, Microsoft tends to go sprinting to like really advanced things like biz chat and integration with Copilot and Excel. But I found some really basic ones. I'm getting an awful lot of value out of working with Copilot and Microsoft Excel, especially things that are like syntax related. I've been using Excel for over 30 years, Lotus 123 before that, I think Multiplan before that, because I'm comfortable with spreadsheets. But I always seem to get like one parenthesis out of place when I'm doing formulas. And so Copilot really helps with that. We'll also take a look at a couple of things it can do to help us kind of work with and clean up data and information and extract insights with it. And then we'll finish with a little bit of Python. And that's probably the most advanced thing. So I'll give a little context on what that means, who it's important for, because it tends to be a little bit more oriented toward data scientists rather than general business users. But it does a wonderful job of kind of bringing these two classes of information and data analysis together in sort of a common platform underneath Microsoft Excel, which everyone tends to have on their desk. So that's kind of my flow. If you're watching the live session, go ahead and drop comments. And I'm not keeping a really close eye on that as I'm going, Nina. So please, will you just let me know? And I'm not saving anything for a big finish. So if you see something, as you work with a lot more customers directly than I do. That's one of the great things I love about work with my tech. If you see something that, from the field, this is what I've encountered here, will you please share that? That can help give us a little bit of context.
Absolutely.
Great. I want to give us, speaking of context, like why now? Like the marketing and sort of hype cycle around AI is kind of at peak in 2024 and 2025. And I just want to give a little context. The reason it is artificial intelligence, which under the covers tends to be mathematical models based on statistical regression and other tools, have been around for 20 or 30 years in different forms. I've been using my iPhone to identify plants and birds on hikes, for years. And what we would do is you take something in the analog world, digitize it into ones and zeros or a series of numbers, and then run regression against that to identify patterns. And in 2017, a couple of researchers at Google came up with something called the transformation architecture. They released a white paper on it that essentially gave the method to go in reverse, to take a known pattern or model and generate new content based on that. So probably Chat GPT might be the most well-known and sort of the consumer and across the space tool that falls into this group of large language models or large learning models. There's many out there now, many that are specialized. Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI, which is the parent organization that creates Chat GPT. And so Microsoft 365 Copilot is actually us running an instance of Chat GPT inside of Microsoft's data centers and our infrastructure, and also inside of your Microsoft 365 subscription. And I call that last part out because we don't use any of your data to train our models. We don't pass your information up to Microsoft or anywhere else. We actually put something called enterprise data protection over the top of everything in Microsoft 365. So the reason it's all a hit right now is it took all the vendors a few years to bring this new mathematical model to commercial viability. So we started to see these things show up in around 2023, 2024, and now Microsoft is doing things like incorporating artificial intelligence directly into Microsoft 365 and specifically into Copilot. Our secret sauce is what we call the Microsoft Graph. So this is, in this context, graph is a mathematical term. It's referring to a special type of vector database of all your interactions with Microsoft 365. So when you send an email or like a post in Microsoft Teams or engage in Viva Engage or open up a file in SharePoint, Microsoft 365 keeps track of that. And so it can kind of build associations with content around you and information that you work with. And so what makes Copilot unique is it uses that large language model running inside of Microsoft's infrastructure. It reasons over your data, and then it shows up in two places. And this is my first kind of cool thing I like with Excel is actually not even using it inside of Excel, but out in what we call BizChat, which is the chat bot in Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then it also shows up in the Microsoft 365 apps. And that's where we'll spend most of our time in Excel, is kind of looking at some examples of that. So I just want to give a little context on like, why are we seeing such a buzz right now for AI? That's why. And then what makes Copilot unique? Well, Copilot is Microsoft's implementation of a large language model that reasons over your work data. So you have to have a Microsoft 365 subscription to have access to Copilot. Your work data includes things like email communications, as well as all your files, like Microsoft Excel files. And then it also shows up inside the individual apps as well, too. So Nina, just quick context. Does that sound consistent with like where you're seeing companies you work with? Like for many of mine, I would say they're a relatively new maturity working with AI. Lots of use cases that are mature, but kind of figuring out a broad strategy. Is that what you're seeing as well too?
Yeah, and I see that, people are kind of in different places on that journey, but I think it's exactly what we were just talking about before we started this call was, trying to figure out those exact use cases, because I think it's just helping clients to connect the dots with the
Yeah.
tool, and then where does this actually practically work and how does that change my world, type of thing. And one other thing, I love that you called out that Excel, the BizChat can be used together with Excel as well as within the Excel app. I have found that feature incredibly useful for things like, attaching an Excel document and writing reports and doing all kinds of other amazing
Yeah.
things. So I think that's an important point, that it's not only within the app itself, but that, BizChat kind of spans all of the different apps, and there's some really great things to do there too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to use a lot of analogies, and I've worked for Microsoft for a long time. It kind of reminds me of spell check. So the little red squiggly line showed up in Microsoft Word first. And now it's everywhere. I think Notepad has spell check built into it. So we didn't want to say, hey, you've always got to go over here and
Mhm.
copy and paste things into Word to run spell check against them. Well, same thing. We want to have the Copilot interface kind of be available in all the different apps, and also available kind of standalone to reason across information that is not in any specific app, but just in Microsoft 365. So you use example report. Let's take a look. So what I've done is I've gone in my browser to m365.microsoft.cloud. And so I'm looking at Microsoft 365 Copilot just in a web browser in the chat bot. I can also get to it in one other place if I go to Microsoft Teams. Up at the top of my list of chats, there's the Copilot chat there as well too. I can even pop it out into another window. So that's how I can get to the first thing, this business chat, or you hear Microsoft people say biz chat. This is what we're referring to. It's just talking to Copilot as a chat bot. Now, one of the things I can do here is I can ask it information about my work. For example, what meetings do I need to prep for this month? And when I ask it that question, it's going to reason across my work data. It's looking at like my calendar in Exchange Online and in Outlook. It's looking across like scheduled items that I've had coming over inside of Microsoft Teams. It puts together a list. These are my meetings that are coming up. And I could say, what documents do I need to review to prep for this week? Now Copilot is looking inside of both meeting invitations to see maybe there was a file attached, like an agenda, or there's an association with a word. Maybe I've got a meeting called sales forecast, and it seems I've got an Excel spreadsheet with the word sales in the title. So it's kind of suggesting, hey, these might be ones that you're interested in. And I've been practicing my demo before our session, so you can even see like it's noticed like, oh, hey, you've got some demo files recently open because you've got that webinar with MyTech. But here I can see that it's suggested a couple. For example, I've got this Excel file here of sales data, and I know I've got my sales meeting coming up. So give me a summary of. This is typical for me. I don't know if it is for you, Nina. I've got a meeting. I kind of forget all about it until that 15-minute reminder pops
Yep.
up on my screen. And I'm like, oh, shoot, what do I need? What was I supposed to do to get ready for that? I want to appear like I know what I'm doing when I show up, but I don't have time to like read through everything. So I'm going to say, give me a summary of, and I can either hit the little paperclip or just a forward slash. And this kind of lets you go out and sort of select things from the Microsoft Graph and drop them into the prompt here in Copilot. So I'm going to pick this. I've had this file open recently. I could also go up here to files, or I can even do a search for it. But I saw that I've got the sales meeting coming up. So I'm going to say, give me a summary of the global sales data and any trends I should share with management. Now, I haven't opened Excel yet. Copilot's able to see inside of the Excel file. Now, if it was password protected or something, then, or I didn't have permission to see it, it wouldn't be able to do this. So this is a file like in my OneDrive or a SharePoint or Teams site that's already been shared with me. Copilot can only see the things that I've got permission for. And I said, go ahead and just read through it. Let me see what you see inside of there. And so it scans through and puts together a quick summary of what's in that Excel file. It's looking at things like the sheet names, the tabs on the sheets, any formatted tables or data ranges, given a sense of kind of insights and trends. And then it says, okay, here's kind of what you might recommend for management. And I can also go ahead and continue to work here in BizChat. For example, it's suggesting down here additional questions I might ask, like give me some more information on the highest revenue cities. We're going to open up this file in a second and see what's actually in there. But there it's actually pulling out. So that's going to be some sort of detail row inside the workbook when we open it up. So that's kind of number one, is I don't have to open Excel. I can just use BizChat as so I'm a technical person at Microsoft, but I'm adjacent to our salespeople. So I need to know about some of our sales activities to be ready to help customers, but I don't need to track like pipeline and forecast. I'm not in Excel every single day. So this gives me kind of a nice managerial level of access to this information, because I can just ask questions about the information trending around me without ever even opening it up. Let's look at one last thing, then I'll ask you a quick question, Nina. So if I look here as I've been going kind of quickly, you'll notice every time I'm asking Copilot a question, it's putting a little citation number after every single response. Like these are all coming out of one workbook, so it's just showing me one. But if I scroll all the way back up to that list of meetings, you can see what's happening here is it's got links to all the different resources that it looked up. So every time you get a response in Copilot, we want you to know where the information came from. So then if you click on the little citation, it'll take you out to wherever that actually was derived from. In this case, it's this Microsoft Excel file. And that way I could dig deeper and start working with it if I wanted to. Nina, I was just curious, like, how do you guys organize your information at MyTech? Like we have really aspirational people who are in charge of things like naming conventions. They want us to put everything in the right spot in SharePoint, and honestly, we get to it about half the time, right? A lot of kind of this fluid information is in Teams, as attachments and Outlook, and just being able to go off and have it find it for me, I find is a big part of the advantage.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's, especially with the chat, that you can open up the scope so widely. So it just kind of reminded me, just looking at your spreadsheets. I was working on governance the other day, and as you know, there's a lot of raw data to sift through. There were probably like 10 or 12 tabs in the workbook with everything from all the teams, all the SharePoint sites, memberships, all kinds of different things. And, typically that could take a good hour to kind of sift through all that information and kind of
Yeah.
highlight certain things. And I just got Copilot to kind of help me with it and said, I need to write a governance report for this quarter, go through all the data on all the different sheets and, kind of pick up trends, make recommendations. Obviously, as with anything with AI, you always need to go check it, but it did a
Yeah.
pretty good job of it getting me a good 60 or 70% of the way there, where, it would have taken me quite a bit of time to review all that data. So love that feature, and to be able to generate probably like a 3 or 4 page report based on that Excel workbook. So yeah, just an interest for any IT and admin folks out there that spend a lot of time going through governance data. And this could be, any comprehensive amount of data, governance or sales or anything. But yeah, I found that to be incredibly useful.
Yeah, I won't show it here, but I've actually found it's really helpful to I can reference multiple files in that biz chat
Yes.
I just did. So I could say, show me here's the forecast this week, the forecast last week. In IT, maybe I've got an export of information from ServiceNow. I want to reason
Hmm.
across that inside of it. Actually, that's a bad example. We have a connector to ServiceNow. But I, I could ask it a question
Yeah.
across these different data sources that normally, yeah, you got to like do a lot of cleanup to kind of pull it together. So,
I think that's a
yeah.
good point as well, to be able to to reference multiple documents like that really quickly, where that's obviously a little bit harder to do if you're using Copilot within Excel itself. But if another example is I had governance data over 4 quarters, and I could compare the different quarters with one another. You
Hmm.
can imagine that's a pretty comprehensive amount of data. And one thing I did want to call out, just because I know there's a lot of folks that are maybe still kind of on the cusp of deciding, do I need this license yet or don't I? And so a lot of people are kind of working still with the free version of Copilot embedded in Edge. And although you can only reference one document at a time, that's something I could
Oh,
recommend, is like start there, try it out. A lot of, once they've been playing around with that feature, like, oh, this is really great, I want to do more. And maybe it makes sense then to get the paid version of it. But definitely something I can recommend if you're still wondering whether this is something that you want to purchase. Yeah, there's quite a bit that you can actually do with the free version.
yeah, that's a good point too. And let me kind of call that out, especially for the IT people, because we know Microsoft loves to change their product names. So, right. So one of the things we did last January is we introduced Copilot Chat. So this is the chat only experience that's associated with Microsoft 365 Copilot. It can't reason across like all of my work data, but it does let me use the large language model and web-based queries to work with it. And so if you do a search on Microsoft 365 Copilot and Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, every user that has an Entra ID account has access to Copilot Chat. And so that doesn't show up in the apps. It doesn't let me see all of my work data, but I'm calling it out. What it does let me do, so I'm opening up, grabbed a different browser window really quick just to sign in, is if I click here where it says add content and upload,
Hmm.
I can upload a file from my device and I can ask it about that file. And it's only inside of that session. So it doesn't have like the history and some of the more richness that the full expression does. But yeah, you can try many of the things I'm showing if you don't have a full Copilot license, just by going to m365.cloud.microsoft, sign in with your work or school ID, and it'll walk you through what's possible there. Great. Yeah. While we were talking, I went ahead and opened up a spreadsheet in the background. I got a couple here just to kind of play with. We'll see if I can get my way through this without stumbling too much. I mentioned my second kind of wonderful thing that I like is guided formula creation, along with sort of just out of the box insights. So here I've got this workbook that I pulled down, and I've got on this first tab just a list of dates. And this is sometimes common for me. I want to do some kind of a lookup based on information. Like in this case, I'd like to know what day of the week each one of these fell on. Now, for my demo, to make it easy, I went ahead up here and I typed in, I'm going to copy and paste these prompts into Copilot in a second. But you can try this yourself just by typing it in. You won't break anything. All right, so think of this like search. In a second, I'm going to change the data a little bit, and I'll call out a couple of reasons on why I'm doing that. But you can also just experiment with Copilot in Excel. And that's okay. So here, let's do this first one. Notice that as I'm just kind of moving around in the spreadsheet, I'm now getting to this little pop-up of the Copilot icon. The product group affectionately calls this the Skittle. So Copilot shows up in business chat. then it also shows up in the apps, and this is context specific. So depending on what I have selected, it's going to give me a slightly different context menu here. It's the old right mouse click just based on what it's looking at. And that's going to vary from app to app. For example, if I went over to Outlook and highlighted an email I was composing, one of the things that would show up here is, would you like to rewrite and make it more casual or shorter? Right? That doesn't apply to Excel, so it's saying things like suggest a formula or conditional formatting or things like that. So it shows up just as I'm working. I can just kind of click on any range of data or loose data inside the spreadsheet that'll pop up. And then all the way up in the upper right on the ribbon, there's a pane. It's P-A-N-E, not P-A-I-N. This is the Copilot chat pane that pops up inside of Excel. This is a hidden tip. A lot of people don't know this. You can resize this thing. So if you're like on an ultra-wide monitor, feel free to like make that really big so you can see everything. If you're a Power Excel user, you probably also know up here in the formula bar, if you click the little drop down, you can drag that up and down as well too to make it as bigger or smaller as you want. So it hurts my heart a little when I see people like, they're trying to like mix a big nested if statement inside of like 30 characters on the screen. It's like, monitors are cheap these days. Give yourself some space. Okay, so I'm going to ask it, I'd like to have a formula added to just give me the day of the week. So what I'm going to do, just so you don't have to watch me fumble with my typing, is I'm just going to ask it a question. So I've clicked on the Copilot pane. Just to help it find the right spot, I'm going to click into that range. You don't have to do that. It will attempt to find it. So it will look through this worksheet and see there's dates. But just for the demo, I'm going to click in there to make sure it's kind of knows, okay, he wants to work inside of this table. So I think of Copilot kind of like as an eager intern. It'll do a better job, the more explicit you are with your instructions. So go off and running and do whatever we want really, really fast and excitedly. And if we told it something slightly wrong, it'll do that really fast and excitedly as well too. Okay, so I said here, go ahead and create a column for the date of the week. And then let me make my ribbon a little smaller and zoom in so we can see what happened. So this is what I love about this guided formula generation is it kind of looked at the data and came back and said, okay, here's what you want to do. You want to create this date of the week column. Here's the function that I created. So it's actually showing me that's the function I'm going to put in. Because this is a table, it's like a named range in Excel, it's smart enough to look up here and it sees the column heading is the word date, which is why we're seeing text here instead of like B6. If I hadn't done that, that's that insert format as table feature. If I hadn't done that in advance, it would actually show me the cell number as well too. So if you're playing yourself, you're wondering, why do I sometimes see text and sometimes see numbers? It just depends on whether or not you formatted the range in Excel yet. But it shows me, okay, there's a function that I want. Now, if I'm new to Excel, I'm like, well, what does that even mean? It always gives you this little pop out below where it says, show the explanation. So part of what we're trying to do is teach you to fish. If I could use, I think the fishing opener was last week in Minnesota, wasn't it? Yeah, if I could use our analogy. So it's saying, okay, this is how the function works and what it's trying to do. And it kind of breaks it down for me into like a 10th grade level of understanding. Then it previews what the results are going to look like. So it showed me, okay, so cell C6, that's kind of what it's going to appear. And if you just hover over, it'll even give you a preview of what that's going to look like before you pop it in. And then if I go ahead and click insert, that'll drop it in and that'll add it into the worksheet. So that's how I can kind of, for functions, I'm just not even sure how to do. I can find those out. It kind of guides me through it. One thing it will not do is it will not overwrite the original data. So we try to make Excel non-destructive. It will always attempt to append additional columns or rows. Remember earlier I said, oh, it might try to change data. That's what I meant, is it'll add formulas. If I told it, well, here, let's actually do one. Please make this conditional formatted. Actually, no, let's make it even easier. Highlight every row that's a Monday. So I'm just typing in just kind of natural language. Now, as an Excel user, I know what I'm really wanting there is conditional formatting. And so it's going to go through here, build out that custom formula. So this is, okay, this is kind of what you want to do. This is how you would do it. That's what the formula is going to look like. I can go ahead and click apply. So I'm telling it, go ahead and drop that in. It'll allow me to do that. But if I said like delete every row with a Monday, it would have responded and said, I'm sorry, I can't do that, but these are the steps. And then it would like here, 1, 2, 3, it would say, sort by, filter by Monday, select the rows and delete them. And the reason is we don't want you to accidentally have the AI like blow up data, right? We always want to, when we're going to start working with getting rid of information, we want to make sure there's a little bit of human intervention to kind of step through it. Let me show you one more formula example, then I'll pause for breath again. We're recording this a late morning, so I've had like 6 cups of coffee. So yeah, we're cramming like 90 minutes of training in. Here I've got, let's look at 2 things. So here I've got a list of sales figures, and it's for a product that I sold in different countries. So I've got a currency code for each country here in column D, and then revenue. And then over here, I've got some exchange rates for my country. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to convert my revenue into US dollars rather than that local currency. Well, let's do a couple of things here. Let me bring Copilot back up. This is just a static table. So let's do this. Please look up the current exchange rates for the countries in column L. So Microsoft 365 Copilot first looks at your business data in the Microsoft Graph. Then we also use Bing Search. And it's an enterprise data protected version of Bing Search. So things like your tenant and your username are anonymized. The reason that's important is we don't ever want you to like go take business data and copy and paste it into a non-secure place. Right? So IT people that are watching this, shadow IT. Like if we don't give the user a solution, they'll figure out their own. And it might not be, what we want them to use. I always have flashbacks as a Microsoft person of trying to get people to use SharePoint, and they would like bring up like a consumer Dropbox instead. And I said, no, don't do that. But what had happened is they hadn't gotten around to deploying SharePoint. So it's on me. Help them get that up and running. Okay, so here I said, go in and I want you to go look this stuff up. So what just happened there while I was yakking away is it said, okay, here's the current exchange rates. So it actually just went out to the global exchange market. If you want to see where it got these from, again, I can hover over those citations, and it's like pulling it from currencyconvert.com or a well-sourced, approved current currency information. And it's not going to let me drop it right into that table. Instead, here it's saying, you know what, if you'd like, we can insert it into a new sheet. So that's a little bit of a difference there is, it said, hey, that's going to be a big enough change to this one. I'm going to just add a new worksheet to your workbook so you can work with it. Again, we're trying not to be destructive with the information. And it says, okay, you're done. So that's one of my other things that I just love is I can kind of go out here quickly and just do a quick lookup from the web. And I can do that with just about anything. Earlier today, I was playing Nina. I said, show me a list by year of the largest walleye caught in Minnesota for each of the last 10 years and the snowfall that occurred the winter before. And it churned away and it kind of built that table. So it's just kind of cool. Yeah, it's kind of like search on steroids, just a little bit. So do you find yourself, are you often, I'm assuming like I'm this way, like I would say 80% of my analysis is over my work data. But
Yes.
occasionally I do need to bring in that, like, let me get something current from the web. And it's kind of a nice way to be able to go out and grab that.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty cool feature, and I love that you're showing the formulas. I love the analysis. I love all the other stuff that it can do in Excel. Obviously, I'm a bit of an Excel geek myself, but the help with the formulas is actually pretty amazing, even for people that have used Excel for many, many years, because there's just certain formulas we don't work with every day. And
Yeah.
then the time and effort and, searching online to get the syntax just right, that's 40, 45 minutes right there, just, fiddling away with the formula. That's one of my favorite things about Copilot in Excel is just like, I need help with this formula. Can you please quickly just put it together? And, away it goes. So love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I like for me, so I got my MBA at the Carlson School here in Minnesota like 20 years ago. All right. And so during that period of time, I was obsessed with like all the financial formulas. That's what my classes
Mhm.
were about, future value money. Well, I've forgotten all those, right? They're just out of my head.
I
Sleep, we
maybe
had
remember
kids.
three.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know if I can do it. Something about the interest rate and
Yeah,
the
PMT,
period.
IPMT. I don't.
Yes. Oh, that sounds familiar. Yeah. There's that Boyle's law with pressure and temperature. It's all blended together, right?
Yes.
So that's really frustrating because I know that formula exists. I just
Yes.
can't remember it.
Remember
Yeah,
it.
so I would go
Mm.
off, and the help file's good. I can go off and Google it or Bing it. If you're gonna Google something, Google it with Bing. I can do a search to find it. But yeah, here, let's do one as an example. So I'm going to say, and again, so you don't have to watch me type. I'm just going to copy this prompt. And I can put this in any language that I want. So I might just say, hey, I'm trying to figure out local currency. That might get it. The more prescriptive you can be with the language, so think of it like just composing a sentence with like a verb and an object and the outcome that you want, the better Copilot will do, because it's able to kind of discern things like, oh, he wants a bulleted list, or oh, he's looking for a formula, or oh, he means this column header. Where if I just said, hey, add currency to this workbook, it might not know what to do if I didn't give it as much information. Back to the intern, right? Happily blinking, holding their day planner or phone ready to go. Okay, dating myself. Let me go ahead and drop that in. So I said add a column that gives me the revenue in US dollars. Go ahead and look it up based on the exchange rates in the exchange rates column. So here's a good example where it's coming up and says, I can't help with that. So it couldn't quite figure that out. I didn't give it quite enough information. So let's give it a little bit more. The exchange rate column in column L, the currency lookup is in, let's see, currency code is in column D. You can mistype a little bit. I want to see if I can trigger one more error here. We'll see if it does it. So you can see as it's working, it's kind of my hands are away from the keyboard. It's like highlighting that range and kind of parsing through it, put it together. Okay, so what's happened here is Excel keeps track of like everything I'm doing, excuse me, Copilot, everything I'm doing throughout this whole session. So in large language models and working with like Copilot, ChatGPT, it's actually appending each one of these prompts I'm putting in, kind of put a great big long string so it remembers context. Every now and then I found something like this happens where it's like gotten confused. And it's because I moved from one workbook to another workbook to another worksheet while the pane was open. So what I'm going to do is if you go here into Copilot, you can close it. Let me open it back up, and then I can tell it new prompt or start over, and that'll kind of reset its current memory. See, it says, okay, here, as Copilot, how can I help you today? And now it's giving me like suggested prompts and dropping them in. So it's gonna kind of forget what it was doing earlier and be a little bit more explicit on what I've got highlighted there. So, and it's going to churn for a second, so I'm going to stop it. The other thing you'll notice here is it's giving me all these suggestions. So we want you to learn how to use Copilot. So as I'm going here, let's grab a different worksheet. Let's highlight a section here. And I'm going to say suggest conditional formatting that I might apply. What's happening is if I know what to type in, I can go ahead and do that. But what if I'm not a Power Excel user? Well, down here at the bottom, we always show you these are some prompts you might try. So if you're not sure where to start, just click on one of those. If that's not enough, down here at the bottom, we've actually got a little button that says View Prompts. It'll open up a window of different prompts you can try. And down here where it says see all prompts, and I've got a link to this. So if you go to the comments here in LinkedIn or YouTube, if you're watching the recording, the link will be right here. This is what we call the Copilot prompt gallery. It gives me sample prompts that I can use across Copilot for Microsoft 365. So I can go in and filter those down. So I'm going to say, hey, just like show me prompts inside of Microsoft Excel if I'm in this type of a role, and it'll go ahead and trim those up. Oops. Overly filtered, but it'll just give me a chance to kind of see what's possible. Then if I click on one of those, I can say, go ahead and try it, and it'll actually then drop it in to that workbook for me and go ahead and run that prompt. So as you're playing and learning, that's a great way just to kind of try these out, is go out and just try these sample prompts. You'll notice, it's a good call out, for this to work, the workbook has to be saved inside of Microsoft 365 somewhere. So you can't have it on your local computer. It's got to be saved up in the cloud. And it's going to always want you to sign in just so it can reason over everything with your Copilot license. So you can see there I had the browser open, but I wasn't signed in. Now it's going to let me drop it in. It's going to drop it in that prompt and let me work with it. So that's kind of how I can go out and learn a little bit more. The other place I can go and learn a little bit more about Copilot, I'm going to do a big finish here in a second, Nina, with a little bit of Python. But before we do, just because I know we're getting to the end of time, let's just look really quick at one more thing, which is the other place that I can get a lot of really good information from is the Copilot and Microsoft Excel Help and Learning Center. So if you go to support.microsoft.com, and again, these links are in the comments. This is where all of our help files sit for all of the Microsoft business products, as well as a couple consumer ones as well too. So if I scroll down a little bit, I'm going to say, just give me a list of all the products. And the one that I'm working with is Microsoft Excel. And so the Excel Help and Learning Center, if I'm new to using Microsoft Excel, this is where I can go. If I click on these top categories, it'll take me through like how to do things like format data, for example. But right at the top, it says, get started with Copilot in Excel. And we've got about a dozen help articles that go a little bit slower through the things that I just showed, like the formula advising. And it gives you step-by-step guidance, pictures, and some of these also have short little videos to go along with them as well too. So I'll pop up my PowerPoint slide again here at the end in a second. But we want you to use the tool, so don't hesitate to click on help and you'll jump out to it to go to it. If you're in a role where you're like helping other users, like maybe you're in charge of training or something like that for your company, let me bring my slide back up. So where I just jumped there was this learning center. The other resource that I have is we actually have an out-of-the-box training deck ready to go to work with Microsoft Excel and Copilot. So let me drag this over from the other monitor. So this is just a pre-formatted trainer deck, meant like if you do a lot of training, it's got like screenshots in it, examples, things to show. A lot of times I'm like delivering a lunch and learn and I just need some content to get started from. So the link to get to that is ak.ms/copilot/Excel get started. And again, we'll drop that in at the top. That's the link to the gallery. The blog will have any updates like I referenced from Ignite. Let's finish. Let's look at something fun in Python. So if I jump back over to Excel, and I navigated from our screen there. Okay, make sure I don't accidentally close this, the tab on our webinar. That would be disastrous. Okay, let's jump back over here. And so Python is a programming language. It came out about 20 years ago. It's really popular for data scientists, data analytics. It essentially allows me to bring in functions and capabilities outside of Microsoft Excel. If you ever worked with the old Excel add-ins that we used to have and still do for some third-party tools, it's analogous to that. But think of it as like a whole library of additional functions and visualizations based on a deep data science to work with large data sets and bring in more advanced visualizations than like the charts and graphs are out of the box inside of Microsoft Excel. So what I'm going to do is I switch to this tab that has a lot of verbatim text on it. I'm going to bring up Copilot again, and I'm going to tell it I'd like to use Python for advanced analysis. Let's use Python. The other thing that I can do is I can click into any cell and click =PY, and that also enables the Python library add-in. So what I'm doing here is what's going to happen now, Excel is going to need a little bit more computing resources to work with this library that it's bringing in. That's why I explicitly say, hey, let's do some deep analysis. If you were watching really closely, you'll notice it's been prompting me saying, hey, would you like to go a little deeper in the analytics that you're doing? I'm going to say, yep, let's go ahead and turn on Python. And so what that's going to do is it grabs the range that I was in. It builds a new worksheet, so it's got some information to manipulate inside of Python. And now you'll notice that the prompts it's given me are a lot more longer and more advanced. So I'm going to say, let's do a sentiment analysis on these survey comments that I've got here in Microsoft Excel. So again, what it is, it added a worksheet, so it's got a place to work. Think of like how a pivot table works. It's actually looking over at that original tab that I had. And it's put together a summary of, what is this, my HR onboarding survey. So it put together a short little table. I can go ahead and add that into a new sheet. I'm going to say, please create a word cloud based on that sentiment analysis. So a word cloud visual, that's not in Excel. It's not out of the box. But Python actually has a function I can call that will generate it. So it's going to say, okay, go ahead and reason over that So it's going through all that text that I just saw that was like, coming out of an Office form or something like that. Put together a word cloud for me. Now I could drop that into PowerPoint or refresh it or somewhere else. And it's also giving me additional prompts that I can continue to work with and reason over that. So going deep into Python is a whole other session, but we announced our support for Excel and Python inside of Microsoft Excel about 18 months ago. If you go out to the Excel blog, let me bring that up here really quick and bring that screen back over. So if you're a business user, which I would classify myself as, I do like sales forecasting and tracking into quarter metrics and stuff. I don't really need this level of analysis. But if you're a data scientist, that's where like the Copilot support for Python really comes in. And so I'll make sure that we grab this link to Nina and include it in. This is our announcement where we introduced the whole concept of Copilot and Python. The reason that's important is just like we saw with Excel functions, I don't know how to write Python, but I can use Copilot to help me write some of these more advanced visualizations and capabilities, and then it'll let me do a lot more deeper analysis just right out of the box. So I don't know if that was a feast of information or if I just kind of ran past the buffet and we saw what there was to eat. But there's some quick capabilities. I want to encourage everyone, go out to that Help and Learning Center, take a look at that. Again, the links that we have in the comments here for the video, take a look at a couple of those. We'll keep those updated. And that Excel blog link is about the best one to use for like what's new, especially as Microsoft introduces new capabilities into the products.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I've never seen the word cloud before. So now I'm curious to see all the other things I can
Oh my
build.
God, just teased it. So yeah.
Yes.
Uh, Try this when we're off the stream. Open up Copilot and ask what are some visualizations you can do with Python, and it'll give you a list, right, just right there in the tab. So you can actually use it to learn about itself too. You don't always have to go out to a help file or come to a webinar or something.
That's
It's
a
it's
good
pretty
tip
sharp.
because I've seen some amazing visualizations, but I feel like the list is pretty endless.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of one of that thing. There's always a new chart or graph or visualization. Someone else has thought of. What I always think of is somebody's got a performance review and they're trying to hide one metric, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to present mine as a balloon chart because my boss doesn't know how to read that. So I'm joking, of course, but I do. It is kind of cool because it just allows us to light these things up without having to build them into the product.
Yeah, one teeny tiny little thing I wanted to call out in the Copilot prompt in Excel, there's a little microphone icon, which I found incredibly
Oh
helpful.
yeah.
I'm like, like I have a long description and a whole long story to tell Copilot, and sometimes to type that whole thing out is just really strenuous. So to be
Oh my
able to use the
gosh.
microphone icon and say, hey, here's a whole long essay about everything that I want, and just to tell it is actually so much easier.
Yeah, I here. Can I show that quick?
Yeah, yeah.
That little microphone shows up all over. If you're a Windows user, you can also press the Windows key and the letter H, and that also bring up dictation. So let's see here. Oh wait, no, I can't do that because I'm using my microphone for our webinar. Let's just
Yeah.
if I click on it, it's going to say it doesn't know what to do. Yes, if I click on that, that's where I would go and start talking to it. Same thing over in that business chat. If I go here, let's see, I don't think it'll work, but let's just see what happens here. Yeah, if I turn on the Windows key and H, that'll turn on speech services. Then I could start voice typing. And it's going to get all confused because I'm using my microphone for the webinar. But that my kids call that a dad lecture, where I just sort of talk without having any point to it. So I can just kind of ramble into Copilot, and then it'll actually discern what I'm actually trying to do. It nets it out to a structured query, and then gives me that result. That's a great tip. Thanks for calling that out. That works really well on Copilot on your phone as well too. So use the
Mhm.
Copilot mobile app. That microphone capability is wonderful.
Well, that's a good tip in the browser because up to now I didn't, because it wasn't an actual microphone icon. I've been using Dictate and Word and copying and paste it in there. So that's great. Now I don't have to do that anymore. So
All
just
right.
checking comments. I don't see anything, any comments, questions. We'll just hang in there for just a few seconds. And I'm not really seeing anything there. No comments, no questions. All right. So yeah, thanks everybody for participating today. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I definitely had a lot of fun and learned a whole lot of new things as well. So that's amazing. I just saw from Taryn. Yep, no comments. Okay. So yeah, Nick, I super appreciate you joining us today and sharing all of this. I really did have a lot of fun. If anybody has any follow-up questions, you can just contact my tech. If you need help with any of this, there's definitely training available and any other help that you might need. But other than that, Nick, I don't know if you have any parting words before we say goodbye to everyone.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us. I will. I'm in the Champions community on LinkedIn, so I'll see
Mhm.
you there. If you got questions, drop them in, and I'll see you at one of our upcoming users community sessions.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.